Go ahead and judge me, but first tell me what I actually did wrong. I found a way to make hundreds of thousands of dollars by teaching women how to put weak husbands in their place. My husband stood in front of every camera, followed every instruction, and never once found enough courage to stop me. The night I made him admit that every man watching was better than him, the video crossed 1 million views before breakfast. He watched the numbers rise, gave me his small, empty smile, and asked whether I had saved the original file. By morning, the whole country would finally understand why I had never respected him. My name is Renata Cole. I am 34, and I built social media campaigns before I built a business from my marriage. People say I humiliated my husband. I say I finally found something he was useful for. Adults can leave when they dislike a situation, and my husband had every door available to him. Instead, he stood under my camera and helped my videos earn more money than his job ever brought home. The first time I made him call himself weaker than another man, he gave me that small, empty smile and asked whether I had saved the original file. We had been together for 9 years. Every Sunday, we visited a flea market, chose one old record, and played it while he made lemon pancakes. He remembered how much sugar I liked. That was how he loved people, through tasks, through things that could be checked. When I lost my advertising job, he turned the spare bedroom into a studio and bought me a ring light. Then my videos failed. 12 views, 8 views, 15. I posted advice about confidence and marriage, but nobody cared. My husband showed me a chart and explained that growth required patience. I asked whether he understood that I was disappearing. He answered by suggesting new content categories. That was my husband. I needed him to look frightened that I might become nothing, and he offered categories. The first humiliation video happened after dinner with my friend Tessa. A young waiter kept returning to our table. He leaned close when he spoke and touched the back of my chair when he passed. My husband saw it. He kept eating. On the drive home, I asked why he had not done anything. He said he trusted me. I heard that losing me would not disturb him enough to make him stand up. At home, I turned on the ring light. The red recording light appeared above the lens. My husband asked what I was doing. I told him I wanted to make a joke about the waiter. He asked why the joke needed him. I explained that viewers liked honesty and that his lack of jealousy made him look weak. He said trust was not weakness. I told him that was what weak men said when they were afraid to compete. He asked whether humiliating him would make me feel wanted. That question annoyed me because it placed the problem back on me. I told him nothing was being done to him. He was only saying what everyone at dinner had seen. The waiter had more confidence and more masculine energy. My husband refused. Not loudly. He never did anything loudly. He said he would not help me punish him for trusting me. I reminded him that adults could leave whenever they wanted. He looked toward the door, then back at me. He stayed, so I started recording. The first take was useless because he spoke without emotion. I stopped and told him to look into the lens. On the second take, I made him admit that the waiter had looked more masculine than he did. Then I made him say that any woman would have noticed the difference. His jaw tightened halfway through. That was when the video became valuable. I replayed it 6 times after midnight. Each time his face changed, I felt larger. My husband stood in the doorway and watched me watch him. He did not demand my phone or raise his voice. He only asked whether I had saved the full recording or just the edited version. I told him I kept both. Then he gave me that same small smile and asked me to send him the complete file. I assumed he wanted to study how pathetic he looked. I sent it before bed. The next afternoon, Tessa watched the clip in my studio. She laughed, looked at the view counter, and told me women would pay to see a husband put in his place. That was when I stopped seeing one embarrassing video. I saw a series, a brand, an audience. My husband had spent years making me feel ordinary, and now his weakness could finally make me impossible to ignore. I named the account Her Rules, His Place. The title was simple enough for people to remember and sharp enough to make them angry. Anger helped. People shared what offended them faster than what inspired them. My first series was called Husband Correction. Each video began with something my husband had done wrong, followed by his explanation of why a better man would have behaved differently. When he forgot to compliment a dress I had bought for Tessa's birthday, I placed him under the ring light and made him admit that attentive husbands noticed when their wives made an effort. When he refused to argue with a rude bartender, I made him explain that the bartender had shown more confidence in 30 seconds than he had shown all evening. When he worked late instead of attending one of my events, I made him rank himself below every husband who had arrived on time. The videos were short, clear, easy to repeat. The red recording light came on, my husband sat in the chair, and I gave him the sentence that viewers wanted to hear. At first, only a few hundred women followed the account. Then one of them offered me $200 if I could make my husband thank me for not replacing him. I showed him the message while he was washing dishes. He asked whether I had posted the waiter video publicly. I told him it had only been shared inside a small private group. That was not completely true. It had already passed 40,000 views. He found out the next morning when someone from his office sent him the clip. He came home late and placed his keys in the ceramic bowl near the door. He did everything in the same order, even when he was angry. Shoes by the cabinet, wallet on the shelf, phone face down. Then he entered the studio and asked why I had left in the moment where he told me to stop. I said viewers needed to understand the tension. He reminded me that I had promised the recording would stay private. I told him adults were allowed to change their minds, especially when an opportunity appeared. He said my opportunity had his face on it. I explained that the income benefited both of us. He asked whether I had signed any commercial agreement using his image or voice. That was when I laughed. My husband could make anything sound like an audit. I told him not to turn my success into another boring compliance meeting. He asked whether the platform allowed users to export original uploads, revenue reports, edits, and audience information. I asked why he cared. He said he wanted to understand what existed online. I heard something else. I heard that he was frightened by how many people had seen him obey me. I told him the internet remembered strong people and forgot weak ones. He nodded, checked his phone, and asked whether I still kept every raw file on the external drive. Of course I did. Edited clips brought attention, but raw footage showed the real pressure. Sometimes the best moment happened before the official take, when he was still trying to refuse. I kept everything because good content could be reused. My husband gave me that small smile and asked me to send him the full waiter recording again because the first file had not downloaded correctly. I sent it without thinking. He was becoming obsessed with his own embarrassment, and I found that almost flattering. Damien Shaw contacted me 3 days later. He ran a small growth agency for controversial creators. He said my account had something most influencers spent years trying to fake: real discomfort. Damien explained that viewers were not returning because they agreed with me. They returned because they wanted to see how far I would push my husband. He told me to stop making safe videos. Safe women were ignored. Dangerous women were shared. Tessa loved him immediately. She began coming to my studio for live streams and reading the worst comments aloud. One viewer called my husband a decorative roommate. Another asked whether I made him sleep on the floor after a bad performance. Tessa laughed until her eyes watered. My husband usually stood outside the frame, waiting for me to tell him when to sit down. His sister Claire found the account after a video reached 100,000 views. She came to our house without calling and demanded that I remove everything. She said strangers had sent the clips to their mother and that people at my husband's office were repeating the lines to him. I asked whether my husband had sent her to defend him. She said he had not. That made her visit even more insulting. I told her grown men did not need sisters arriving at their homes to protect them from jokes. Claire looked at the ring light, the camera, and the chair where her brother sat. She asked whether I would enjoy watching someone treat me that way. I told her the difference was that I would never allow myself to look so weak. My husband entered before she could answer. Claire asked him to tell me to delete the account. He did not shout. He said he would handle it. There was that calmness again. That empty face. I saw a man too frightened to embarrass himself further in front of his sister. Claire left without hugging me. 30 minutes later, I turned on the camera and told my followers that weak families attacked strong women whenever a husband failed to control his own home. That video performed better than all the others. By the end of the week, 100,000 people were following me. Damien said I had to stop thinking of my husband as a person who appeared in my content. He was the content now. I looked at the red light, then at the chair Evan had placed beneath it for me months earlier. For the first time since losing my job, I no longer felt ordinary. The creator loft smelled like hot cables and artificial vanilla. Damien had rented the entire floor for my first professional live stream. 3 cameras faced a small stage, comments moved across a large screen, and a red recording light hung above the main lens. Damien called the event the masculinity test. 5 men had been invited: a personal trainer, a chef, a business owner, a firefighter, and Damien himself. None of them needed to insult my husband. They only had to stand beside him while I showed the audience the difference. My husband asked what the live stream involved when we arrived. I told him it was a harmless ranking game. He asked whether anyone from his office had been invited. I said no, although the stream was public and anyone could watch. Adults could leave situations they disliked. He was still standing there. Before we began, my husband walked around the equipment and asked Damien whether all 3 cameras used the same time settings. Damien looked surprised and asked whether he had production experience. I laughed and explained that my husband counted numbers for a living. He could not enter a room without turning it into a boring inspection. Then he checked his phone, looked at the red light, and gave me that small, empty smile. I assumed he was preparing himself to be embarrassed in front of more people than ever before. The stream began with 12,000 viewers. Within 20 minutes, the number passed 50,000. I placed my husband on a low chair beneath the ring light. The other men stood behind me. First, I asked him to admit that the trainer looked stronger and more disciplined. He said it. Then I asked him to explain why the chef showed more passion than he did. He answered without looking up. I made him say the business owner was more ambitious, the firefighter was braver, and Damien understood what women wanted better than he did. His voice remained calm through every sentence. That annoyed me. The viewers wanted shame. They wanted his voice to crack. They wanted the weak husband they had seen in my short clips. I stepped closer and reminded him that my account now earned more each month than his respected accounting job. I asked what that proved about which one of us had real value. He looked directly at me instead of the camera. There was no anger in his face. That would have been useful. There was only a tired sadness that made the room feel quieter for half a second. I covered it by laughing and told him not to perform for sympathy. Then I handed him a white sign that said "MY wife settled." He held it across his chest. The comments moved so quickly that the screen became a white blur. Tessa sat beside the monitor and read the worst ones aloud. One viewer said my husband looked like an employee waiting to be fired from his own marriage. Another said he should thank me for allowing him to stay. Tessa laughed, but the sound ended faster than usual. I told my husband to thank the audience for helping him understand his position. He did. Then he looked at the red recording light and asked whether the live stream was being archived. Damien said every camera was recording. My husband checked the exact time on his phone and touched the screen once. I thought he was reading the comments about himself. That made the final challenge easier. I asked him to rank every man in the room above himself. He named the firefighter first, followed by the trainer, the business owner, the chef, and Damien. Then I asked where he belonged. He said last. The room erupted. Damien raised both hands like we had won something. The viewer count jumped again. I told my husband to look into the main camera and admit that any woman with standards would choose one of those men before choosing him. He paused. I reminded him that refusing now would only prove he could not handle honesty. He repeated the sentence. I asked him to say that I had wasted years protecting his pride. He said that too. Tessa stopped reading comments. I looked toward her. but she was staring at my husband. When I asked what was wrong, she said we probably had enough content. That was the first time she had tried to end one of my recordings. I continued for another 15 minutes. Safe women were ignored. Damien had taught me that. When the stream ended, my husband stood, folded the sign once, and placed it carefully on the chair. He asked whether I had saved the complete archive. I said yes. He asked me to send him every camera angle. I told him he was becoming obsessed with watching himself lose. He gave me his small smile, touched his phone, and left the loft alone. The sign remained beneath the red light. I photographed it for the thumbnail. That live stream earned more in one night than my old advertising job had paid in 2 months. By morning, 3 companies wanted to sponsor me. They did not care whether my husband had been hurt. They cared that 50,000 people had stayed until the final sentence. So did I. The local news page found the live stream before our families did. It posted a short clip of my husband holding the sign across his chest and asked whether public humiliation could ever be called consent. The page did not use our names, but the comments found them within hours. By Sunday, both families had watched enough. My husband's mother invited us to lunch. My parents were already sitting at her table when we arrived, and Claire sat near the window with her arms folded. Nobody touched the food. My father asked whether I understood what I was doing to my husband. I told him I understood perfectly. I had built a profitable business. My mother said money did not make cruelty respectable. I reminded her that she had spent my childhood telling me to become successful. Now that I was earning more than anyone in the family, she suddenly disliked the method. Adults could leave situations they disliked. My husband had chosen to stay. His mother placed her phone on the table and played an older video. In it, I had made him say that confident men deserved respect and men like him deserved instructions. She asked why I used words that sounded like his father. I told her I did not know what she meant. She said my husband's father used to make him stand inside the garage after every mistake and repeat that he was useless until he stopped crying. I already knew that story. My husband had trusted me with it during our first year of marriage. He had told me he still heard his father's voice whenever someone called him weak. For several seconds, he stared at the table, his thumb pressed against the edge of his phone. The room became quiet enough for me to hear the refrigerator turning on behind us. I looked at him and almost saw the chair beneath my ring light differently. Not as a stage. Not as proof that I could control him. It looked like the garage he had described years earlier. Then Claire asked whether I had chosen those words on purpose, and the opening closed. I decided they were trying to use his childhood to destroy my work. I told them they were hypocrites. My father raised his voice, so I raised mine higher. I said my husband had his own salary, his own car, and access to every door in our home. If he stayed, accepted the money, and kept sitting in front of the camera, nobody had the right to call him a victim. Claire asked whether I would say the same thing if a husband built a blog from humiliating his wife. I told her to stop repeating cheap internet arguments. My husband finally spoke. He did not defend me. He said I had started using cameras because I no longer wanted to hear the word no. I told him the camera was not the problem. The problem was that strangers agreed with me, and he could not stand it. He said agreement did not change what happened before each recording. I asked what exactly happened. He looked at me for several seconds and said I already knew. That answer made him sound superior. I left the table before anyone could continue. In the parking garage, I found him sitting inside the car with the glove compartment open. He was holding an old birthday card I had written during our second year together. I had told him he was the first person who made ordinary life feel safe. He read it once, returned it to the compartment, and closed the door. I assumed he wanted me to see his sadness without forcing him to explain it. Even his pain was passive. 2 days later, I saw him at a coffee shop with Naomi Quinn, a woman from his firm. Naomi worked with digital records during fraud investigations. 2 laptops were open between them, and my husband had his phone connected to one with a cable. When I approached, Naomi closed the screen. My husband asked why I was there. I said I wanted coffee. Naomi explained that they were reviewing a complicated archive. I dismissed it immediately. My husband always hid inside other people's numbers when his own life became uncomfortable. Damien told me the family reaction could damage future sponsors, so we created a consent video. I placed my husband beneath the ring light and asked whether he participated willingly. He said the question was incomplete. I stopped recording and told him the video would protect both of us. I reminded him that our household now depended on the income. We started again. This time, he said he understood that the videos were being published. I cut the rest. Viewers noticed the edit and began asking why he never said he enjoyed the content. I called them fragile and blocked them. My parents stopped calling. Claire removed me from every family group. Tessa still answered, but her replies took hours and contained no jokes. My real life was becoming quieter while the account kept growing. I considered that a fair exchange. A national morning show contacted Damien after the consent video reached 500,000 views. The producers did not want to discuss my marriage. They wanted a new challenge they could explain in one sentence. Damien called it "Every Man is Better." The idea was simple. My husband would sit under the ring light and admit that every man watching was better than him. Not one waiter, not 5 men in a rented loft. Every man. Then he would explain that I had married beneath myself and thank me for not replacing him. The clip would promote my paid course about female authority. Damien believed it could reach 1 million views. I believed it could reach 2. I prepared the studio myself. The ring light stood in the same place where my husband had installed it after I lost my job. I adjusted the brightness until every line in his face was visible. Then I attached a microphone to his shirt and placed the script on his knees. He read the first page and set it on the table. He asked me to build the course without using him. I told him that made no sense because the account needed visible results. He said I could talk about confidence, ambition, and marriage without forcing him to insult himself. I explained that nobody wanted another ordinary woman talking into a ring light. Viewers wanted proof that my methods worked. My husband asked whether I understood what I had just said. I told him he had finally become useful to me. He looked at the camera, then asked whether the morning show would receive the full recording. I said they only needed the finished clip. He checked the time on his phone and gave me that small, empty smile. I thought he had accepted that his role in my business was permanent. Before I turned on the red light, he made one final attempt. He said he had failed me before the blog existed. When I needed comfort, he gave me plans. When I needed honesty, he disappeared into work. When I tried to create an argument just to get a reaction, he treated my anger like noise that would end if he stayed quiet long enough. That was true. I told him so. Then I told him the rest of the truth. He had abandoned our marriage emotionally while continuing to enjoy the safety of being my husband. He came home every night, paid bills, repaired broken things, and expected those tasks to replace affection. He had stopped fighting for me years earlier. Now he hated that strangers could see the result. He did not deny any of it. He only said his failure did not give me ownership of his humiliation. I turned on the camera. The red light appeared. The first take was useless because he spoke without emotion. I stopped and told him to look directly into the lens. On the second take, he said that every man watching was stronger, more confident, and more worthy of respect than he was. I told him to repeat it because he sounded like he was reading a grocery list. The third take was better. I made him say that I had wasted years protecting the pride of a loser. Then I made him admit that any woman with standards would have selected someone louder, more ambitious, and more masculine. He repeated each sentence. I asked him to say that I could replace him before the day ended. He said it. Then I told him to thank me for keeping him. His voice became quieter. That was the part viewers would replay. I made him repeat the line 4 times. On the final take, he looked straight into the camera and said every man was better than him. His wife had married beneath herself, and he should be grateful she had not thrown him away. I ended the recording. My husband remained in the chair. He watched the red light switch off, checked the exact time on his phone, and asked whether the sponsor name would appear in the final edit. I said yes. Then he asked whether I had backed up the original file. I told him I backed up everything. He gave me his small smile and said he would handle the situation properly. No shouting, no threat, no sudden courage. He only asked me to send him the full recording when I finished editing. I assumed he had finally stopped fighting his place. The finished video lasted 38 seconds. I chose the frame where his eyes looked lowest and added a caption explaining that strong women did not need to lie to weak husbands about their value. The clip reached 100,000 views in an hour. It crossed 1 million before breakfast. News pages reposted it. Radio hosts argued about it. The morning show played it twice. My course received 6,000 pre-orders. Damien secured 2 new sponsors, and the account's total revenue passed $480,000. I opened champagne in the studio and sent Tessa a picture of the dashboard. She did not answer. That did not matter. I had money, attention, and proof that the entire world wanted what I had created. My husband's humiliation had finally made me impossible to ignore. The hotel ballroom held 400 people, and my name covered the screen behind the stage. RENATA Cole. Turning female authority ento a profitable brand. Damien stood near the front row with representatives from the platform, 2 sponsors, and the morning show producer who wanted exclusive footage from my course launch. The red lights above the cameras were already on. I walked onto the stage to applause. Then the doors at the back opened. My husband entered beside a woman in a dark grey suit. I recognized Mara Levin because her name had appeared on an envelope that arrived at our house 2 weeks earlier. My husband had said it concerned household records. I had been too busy preparing the launch to ask more. Mara walked to the technician and handed him a small drive. My husband stopped in the front row and looked at me. Then he gave me the same small smile he had given after the waiter video, after the live stream, and after the final recording. It did not look empty now. The title screen disappeared. A folder opened behind me. Hundreds of dated files filled the screen. Each date had a raw recording, an edited video, a revenue report, and a second file marked with my husband's name. Mara explained that every time he had asked whether I saved the complete version, he was confirming that the source recording still existed. My microphone was live when I told the room this was a private marital disagreement. Nobody responded. The first video began. It showed the night after the waiter. The audience watched my husband refuse before the first take. They heard me tell him that staying silent proved he was weak. They watched me restart the camera after he asked me to stop. Then my published clip played. After it ended, another recording appeared. My husband was sitting alone in the studio. He stated the date, the words I had ordered him to say, and the number of times I had made him repeat them. The next video played. Then another. Every humiliation clip was followed by his private response. Sometimes he recorded inside his car, sometimes at his desk, sometimes beneath my ring light after I left the room. He listed the pressure I used, the sponsor attached to the video, and the money it earned. The small click I heard from his phone after each recording had never been him checking comments. It was him ending his own file. Naomi's name appeared in the archive logs. The woman from the coffee shop had preserved the metadata and matched every source recording to my payment reports. My backups protected everything. My careful organization had built the entire case for him. The screen showed the Creator Loft livestream. 50,000 people watched my husband rank himself below 5 other men. Then his response played. He named the cameras, the exact time, and the moment he had asked me to stop. Damien lowered his eyes to the sponsorship folder in his hands. I told the audience it was entertainment. A platform representative asked why every consent statement started only after my husband refused in the raw footage. I said editing was normal. She asked why his refusals had been removed while his humiliation remained. I opened my mouth, but the answer did not sound convincing even to me. Then Mara played the million-view video. My husband said every man was better than him. He said I had married a loser. He thanked me for not replacing him. The clip ended, but the screen stayed black. 3 seconds later, my husband appeared again in the same shirt and chair. He explained that I had required 11 takes. He described how I used the story about his father to force the final line. Then he looked directly into his phone and said my greatest mistake was believing silence meant permission. He said silence had allowed him to preserve everything without teaching me how to hide it. The ballroom became quiet enough for me to hear the electric hum above the stage. Mara replaced the video with my revenue dashboard. $486,000. Beside, it was a list showing which videos used my husband's face, voice, private history, or forced statements. Almost all of them. Damien walked to the platform representative and handed her the sponsorship contracts. He removed his event badge, placed it on an empty chair, and left through the side door. I called his name. He did not turn. Both sponsor representatives followed him. I looked for Tessa. Her reserved chair was empty. Mara said the platform had suspended every payout while the archive was reviewed. My husband finally stood. He admitted that he had failed me long before the blog. He had hidden inside work, answered emotion with plans, and allowed silence to replace intimacy. Then he said being a bad husband had never made him my property. The final divorce decree awarded him the $486,000 remaining in the company and entered judgment for the documented revenue I had already withdrawn. I moved into a one-bedroom apartment above a closed travel agency. My accounts fell below zero after refunds, taxes, and the judgment began arriving. My parents stopped calling. Claire blocked me, and Tessa sent one message saying she would not become part of my explanation. Damien removed my image from his agency website. The platform deleted my course and disabled the account that had made me famous. I still do not understand why people act as if earning money was the worst part. News stations sell disasters. Creators film breakups. Companies turn fear into profit every day. I only used what already existed inside my marriage. That is what I keep saying. But the audience never paid to watch me become powerful. They paid to watch my husband become smaller. Once he removed himself, there was nothing left of my brand. The ring light still stands in the corner of my apartment, but the red recording light no longer works. The last video on my dead account still shows my husband calling himself worthless, while the final payout balance carries his name.